All right. Well, once again, thank you for joining us, Dr. Kelly. And this is our first recording of the podcast. So I'm really, really glad to have you here as a guest, as our first honorary guest.
Yeah,
So
thanks for having me.
just to kind of give a bit of an intro, I know Dr. Kelly Frindell through Study Spaces, but she has the reason I wanted to talk to her because she is one of the most energetic people I've ever met so far in my life. She is always doing something, trying new things, and I think in the world of business and entrepreneurship, that is one of the best qualities. But apart from that, she's also super nice. Even when she has something like a bug to report, she's always super nice, and it's a great quality, and I'm really glad that we get to talk today. Dr. Kelly Frindell, she started tutoring in 2001. She's been doing this for 24 years, and she has obtained her bachelor's in psychology and later her PhD in public health. I want to start right there in terms of how, as a bachelor's in psychology and PhD in public health, gets in tutoring.
Into tutoring, yes. And actually, one did lead me to the other, but fairly indirectly. So when I was younger, when I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to be a college professor. I wanted to teach psychology and set myself up to be able to get into college, to pursue psychology, set myself up for graduate school, got in. And when I got in, I realized about the second day of class that it wasn't quite the right decision. But I was young, I was 22, and I had just worked really hard to get into this program. So I stuck it out for about 3 years and then ended up switching to public health, which was a better fit for me. But the way that it led to test prep was it was actually from taking the GRE for graduate
Ah,
school originally. And I learned 1,040 vocabulary words for that first round of GRE. And at the time, I thought, oh, well, I should do something useful with all those 1,040 words I just learned. And so at the time, I was still a senior in college. I got hired by Princeton Review and learned SAT prep from them. And then when I went off to graduate school, I worked for a couple of private companies. And then when I finished, I moved back to Texas and was trying to figure out what to do as a next step and was doing some tutoring on the side. This was around 2006. And then I ended up deciding to start my business.
that's awesome. As we all know, and a lot of people who are listening to this podcast are going to be company owners, tutors. The decision to go on your own is one of the hardest ones and probably a scary one. And you did this back in 2007 with in-house test prep. Interesting timing as well. It was right before the 2008 crash. How was that decision process of you going forward, and what were the things that were going on in your head in terms of going on your own, risks and benefits here?
Sure. And at the time, pardon me, at the time, I don't know that I intended to start a business exactly,
Hmm.
but I was 26. It was the early 2000s. Craigslist was very new and people were starting to advertise on it and do things. And at the time, I was doing all kinds of stuff. I was doing some editing, I was mystery shopping, I was tutoring. And so I'm not sure that I ever sat down one day and said, this is exactly what I'm doing, but it started to build. And I did not have a full-time job. I actually, out of graduate school, I didn't seek a full-time job.
Hmm.
I did actually, that's not true. I interviewed a couple of places, but I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I started my first business when I was 9 and have always had little side hustles here and there. And that one started to take off. And so I decided to go ahead and pursue it. But
Hmm.
it did take me about 3 years before it was really my primary business. So I
Yeah.
did a lot of that it was gig work before the gig economy was a thing. Nobody had used that term yet, but I figured out how to exploit the internet in the best of ways and found myself other little things. And it is scary to be alone and out there on your own, but it is also all I have known because I have not had a full-time job for someone else any of my adult life. So it's just kind of what I know.
That's all. That's wonderful. So this was a very natural move, and maybe all you've ever known to just be able to work for yourself.
Mhm.
Funny enough, in my story, right, I graduated in 2020 out of college, so I never actually went into office a single day in my life.
Oh, wow.
Uh, so my first job I got out of college was a remote job that I worked for a year. So to me, quitting was also pretty easy because I was like, I never, I guess, got to experience that office or corporate life, and
Mhm.
to me, that just felt very natural. So I think for a lot of people who might be even thinking about, starting their own business, this part of the process is probably the hardest, especially if you're used to being in office or working for a big company or for a steady paycheck. And in this really great book by Ben Horowitz, Hard Things About Hard Things, he talks about this period where early entrepreneurs, when they're doing their business, they go through this period. He calls this the struggle, which is the moment is before your business is really a business, before it's self-sustaining. And you kind of answered the question of how long it lasted. He said it's about 3 years. But what was that 3 years like? How you were making things like ends meet, and like how'd you get through that struggle?
And part of it was because I had to. I'm single and have been, and so it was my only income. And if I wanted to eat, I had to do the work. And I also thought it was really fun trying to figure out all the things. I figured out Craigslist when it came out, how to manage that and how to make contacts and how to do things. And a lot of it was trial and error. And the internet was around, but certainly not in the form that it was now.
Mhm.
And so I threw a lot of things at the wall to see what would stick. And I said yes to pretty much every opportunity that I could.
Mhm.
And it was only later that I started to be able to be a little bit more discriminating about what kinds of work I wanted to take on. But I taught classes at cooking school. I taught at a business school, at the college down the street for GRE. I was tutoring. I was mystery shopping. I was selling books on Amazon before that was a thing. I was reselling them before that had really taken off. I got in early on that. And so a lot of it really was just if I wanted to eat, I had to do the work. And I was still young. I was in my 20s. And so it was fun and it was exciting. And that was just an interesting time because so much was changing so quickly with technology that it was fun finding the new tools that would help me.
That's awesome. Very, very classic entrepreneur story of trying everything, making something work, and until it starts working, and then the ball rolls. Well, this is where we get to in-house test prep. So you start in-house test prep in 2007, and you do right now SAT, ACT, ISAE, SSAT. There's a long list of exams that you prep students for. And you mentioned that helping students exceed their own expectations is one of your drivers. Is what makes you want to do this work every single day. Can you um, talk about that a little bit more? Where did that come from? Just helping people exceed their own expectations.
Sure. So I have a lot of students who have time accommodations for something. They have
Mhm.
dyslexia, they have ADHD, they have another learning difference. And a lot of those students who come to me have very low expectations for themselves because they come and they say, "Oh, I'm a bad test taker," or "My sister or my brother is the good one. They walked into the ACT and got a 35 out of 36 on their first try, and I'm at a 25. I'm dumb. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. I'm a bad test taker. I have test anxiety." All the things. And what I have found is that often what people think is being, quote, a bad test taker or having, they come and tell me they have test anxiety, most of the time that's not actually what's happening. What's actually happening is they're just lacking the basic skills that they need in order to succeed on the test. And I'm particularly seeing that in the last 5 years with all the fallout from COVID and everything that happened. And I know most of my other fellow tutors and teachers are as well. There's been a lot of learning loss, and that is real. And so I have kids coming and they're scared of the math section, they're scared of the grammar section because they don't know how to do it. But when we go back and recapture some of those basic skills, then they can see, oh, actually, I do have the capacity to do a lot of this
Mhm.
work. And it's not so scary. And of course, things are going to be scary if you don't know how to do them. And so I really enjoy that part of it, of helping people see that story is wrong. This real story is they're missing some skills, and that is fixable.
That's awesome. That's awesome, and that's very noble. I think for a lot of, like, I have struggled with SAT for a while. I grew up in Uzbekistan, and that's where I took my SAT, and I was the only one prepping for SAT for a long
Well,
time, and I just could not crack the reading section. I no matter how hard to try. I think I was good at maths. I was doing okay in math, but reading
mhm.
was just every single time. took a long time to get to even a decent score. And I thought at some point I thought this was the ceiling. So I think helping students understand that they can do better, and there are techniques and there are ways and that you can get there. I watched a couple of your podcasts from previous, and you mentioned something interesting a couple of times, that you love tests, and there are I think there are a few people who would say that, but on and I could see how that would be a perfect career for you, going into test prep and tutoring. My question is on, how do you make the kids love tests as well? Like, or is that even the goal?
So I don't think that's even the goal necessarily. I don't think they have to love them. They just need to put in the work and do well on them. But what you're referring to is, I have said that lots of times, that I love tests. And what I mean is, and first I want to preface it by, globally talking about tests, I know that there are issues with standardized tests. There are issues of fairness and equality and equity and all of that. And I'm not denying any of that. And I'm aware of it, being in my profession. What you're referring to about my comment is, I really love preparing for tests because I think it's fun. And when I was studying for the GRE, it was fun. I spent 2 to 3 hours a day for 3 months studying for that test. And that's not necessarily what I recommend for my students, but for me at the time at 21, made sense. And I really liked it. I liked figuring out that, there's patterns to this. It's like a game. And I was never a video game player, but it reminds me in the same way of that, of you learn strategies, there's tells, there's things, and it is all, most of test prep, besides having the basic skills, the rest of it is pattern recognition. And the way that you get better at patterns is by doing them. And so when I was studying for the GRE, and again, it was mostly pre-internet, this was 2000-ish when I was studying for GRE, I got all the books out of the library, and then I had exhausted all of those ones. And then the SAT at the time was very similar to the GRE. So I checked out all the SAT books and I went through those. I made a stack of my 1,040 vocabulary words, which I found the other day. The stack's about 1.5 inches tall of cards with 10 words each on it. And I actually really enjoyed the process because I could see the results as I was working on them. And so when I say I love tests, that's what I mean. I find it fun. So I don't expect my students to love them, but I do tell them that I view it kind of like a game, because it is. It's a game with important stakes and consequences, of course. But if they can view it that way, rather than this is a terrible process that I have to spend the next 3 months of my life slogging through, it helps a little bit with the attitude of it. And not all students can get there, but a lot of them can start to see it that way.
And do you get to see those aha moments when kids realize that it can be a game and it could be fun?
And they're like, oh, I've seen this before. Yes. And they're like, I know what the trick is. Yes. Because there's a lot of that built into tests.
That's fantastic. And one of the things that people should know about in-house test prep, it has gone fully remote, virtual, a while back. And I want to ask this before I make the claim. Did you guys go Zoom pre-COVID or after COVID?
A couple of months pre-COVID. And
pre-COVID,
so,
okay.
Yeah, I was in an office and all in person for years and years. And I actually had never intended to take my business online. I really did not want to. I was scared of it. And I'm an Android user, so I didn't have FaceTime on my phone. I wasn't used to video chatting. And it scared me, and I didn't want to do it. But in December of 19, I was traveling, and I got the idea. I thought, I want to take my business online so I can travel, and came back, joined a business program in January of 2020. And that's when I got my Zoom membership, was January of 2020, and had this grand 3 to 5 year plan to get myself out of my office and online. And it took 3 months in a pandemic, and was it. I was online, and yes, although I lost all my business pretty much overnight because all of the tests got canceled, and so there were no tests, SAT or ACT, basically from February until October of that first year. So I was online, but didn't have many students, and so I spent that time working on my systems and trying to build a curriculum and switching over. But I was glad I had that couple of month head start, because I already had everything set up, and so I could jump right into it while everybody else was scrambling.
Nice. And how long did that take from that moment where, we figured out that it was going to be serious sometime in March and April, I think, of 2020. So how long from there on it took you to build out this online program where it was maybe sustainable again as a business?
So things kind of went in waves. So that first year, most of my business was gone because tests were canceled, and
Yeah.
most of the schools went test optional at that point. That
Yeah.
first year, the second year, I had a really good year, and I think it was because those people were still waiting in the wings. Like those were people who were siblings of the families I had worked for, and a lot of the families that I work with, we cycle through kind of every 2 years because a lot of kids are spaced out that way.
Yeah.
And those ones were already queued up. They were prepped. They knew what to do, and that second year was really good. The third year is where things kind of went off the rails again, because the 2020 group, since I didn't have them, they did not produce the referrals 2 years later, and the machine had gotten broken a little bit because people had lost some of the social transmission of information of, oh, this is the time when you call about test prep, this is when you take test prep, and that was also height of test optional. So I would say, and then things started to cycle around after that. So it took probably a solid 4 years to really get back on good footing. And it's still, everything is different. My whole business has changed, and some of the patterns have changed, and nothing is predictable pretty much anymore. Somewhat, but it is all different.
And I take that your business is mostly distributed through word of mouth, that people talking to each other, telling their friends and family.
And that's how it had been when I was still local. I didn't do any advertising, and it worked. I always like to say I had a machine, and it just hummed along nicely. And that machine did get broken when everything changed. And so the last few years, that's also what I've been working on besides my curriculum side of things, is figuring out how to be a digital business and have clients in multiple parts of the US and in the world. And that was also another thing that I threw a lot of spaghetti at the wall to see what would stick. And I tried the Facebook ads, I did the podcast rounds, and I did the videos on social media, and all kinds of things. And I really struggled with those. I didn't find much ROI on any of those things, and often none. And what has ended up being the most effective for me, I discovered, is networking with other professionals who work with the same clients as I do. And so now I really focus my advertising efforts and my outreach efforts on professionals rather than parents, which is a big shift for me. And that has been successful.
This is just the second version of the 2008 trial and error, where you had to do when you started the business.
No Craigslist.
No
Craigslist is no good anymore. I looked on it the other day and I was like, oh, Craigslist, so sad.
Well, we can talk about the modern version of Craigslist maybe. So 2022 in December, the AI, the first viable version of AI, ChatGPT, launched to the world. Well, first of all, did you have any reaction to it at the moment, as an educator, or maybe even as a user of that technology?
So I ignored it for a little bit, and I love technology and I think it's fun. And I don't think it was on my radar for a little bit, and then it started to be, but I didn't really understand what it was because I hadn't sat down. And it is, as a concept, before you've seen it, it is hard to understand what it is. But I would say by mid 23, I had started using it. I was using the free ChatGPT, and it wasn't very good at the time, so I couldn't do that much stuff with it, but I could do some things. And then I would say in the last year and a half, my use has really picked up, and I use it every day. And I think it's fascinating. And I read Reddit, and several of my Reddit forums are about ChatGPT and AI and Gemini and all the other ones. So I like to read all those too, to keep up with what's going on.
And things are changing fast. And I think the world of edtech, which is the theme of the podcast, I think AI and edtech has been maybe like the most perfect couple for a long time. They've just never been put together. So when you think about how AI is changing the world of education and just learning, how do you see that happening over time? And then how do you see that happening right now in the landscape of technology and education?
So I think I have hopes that it might democratize things a little bit. Like I really find the AI tutors interesting, and I know maybe I should be threatened by them, but I'm not, because it's a different model than what I do. And I feel like, especially for areas of the world where people may not have solid access to education or to teachers or to school even. Like I'm excited about the possibility that people could learn that way and have an individualized, customized program to do. And I do think when people are motivated to do it, that it is a really great module. And I looked at probably in the last year or so, I think Khan Academy came out and had some demonstrations of tutoring. Khan and his son did a thing, and the AI tutor, I was listening to it. They were doing a problem about Pythagorean theorem, I think, and the AI tutor said some of the exact things, like word for word, that come out of my mouth when I'm working with a student on a problem like that. And it was spooky, but I was like, oh, that's what I say. And so I'm excited about the possibility for that. I don't feel too threatened particularly. Like I know some tutors are like, oh, we're going to get replaced. And I think the low level tutors are going to get replaced for sure. Like the $20 an hour varsity tutors, I think that kind of job is in danger. What I do, I think, is different, and people are looking for a different thing that at least right now can't be replicated by AI, but I'm not ruling out that might be the case. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
I agree with you actually in that sense. I recently heard someone in a podcast talking about how the adoption of AI is not a technological, but more of a societal thing, where I think of it a lot in that way, where an AI could tutor your kid, but does your kid want to be tutored by AI?
Right.
It is a human to interaction that may matter a lot. They want to be listened, and kids have different behaviors, and I think there's always that human element that people forget, because it is not a very objective thing. It's not always about correcting their mistakes, not always about getting to the right answer. There's always
there's a fair amount of emotional handholding that goes along with this job. And like there are some people who can do it. And like me, when I told you I spent 3 hours a day studying through that material, I could study with an AI and love it. That is not most people. And I have some students who are like that, but that is a very small minority. And the rest of students are just the motivation piece. I'm not sure a machine can do yet. And it will probably get there. Technology is amazing, but right now that is part of what parents hire me for, is accountability for their students and some of the emotional labor of it, and also the encouragement. And ChatGPT can't do that yet.
And I think this is there's also the human orchestrator part of things, which is that just being able to monitor that progress, even if the student is studying with AI, understanding if that interaction is going well, if there's tweaks need to be made in certain ways, I think could be. And another way is that this may manifest in itself in education. I want to ask a little bit about the future of in-house test prep. And you are fully online now, teaching remotely. Where do you see the business in about 5 years from now?
That is a very hard question to answer. I honestly have no idea. And truthfully, I really felt when the schools went test optional, I thought that might be the end. And I've been teaching for almost 25 years, and I have known from the beginning that this day was coming with test optional, and that eventually the test would fall out of favor. And my philosophy has always been that phrase about make hay while the sun shines. That is how I have lived my business and personal life, because I've known this is not going to be around forever. So I was fully prepared for my SAT and ACT business to be over in 2020. Like I thought it was done. And then it surprised me, and it's been swinging back. Especially with some of the higher level schools, they have all gone back to test required.
People learn their lesson.
that has surprised me, but there's also, with everything that's so uncertain right now with the economy and with politics and things that are going on, but also there's the demographic cliff, as they call it, that's coming, is that the number of 18-year-olds and the number of students who are going to be going to college is going to drop dramatically in the next few years, and that's just straight up demographics. And that's been in the education world floating around for years. We know it's coming. A lot of colleges are going to have to close because, especially some of the smaller ones, they're already on the edge anyway financially, and a lot of them have closed. And so I just think the education landscape is going to change so dramatically in the next 5 years. I have no idea what it's going to do to my industry or to my business.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of businesses adapt and a lot of industries adapt, and so will, I think, people in that sense. If is the demographic shift, in your opinion, happening because not many people will be wanting to go to college, the 4-year colleges anymore, traditional colleges?
It's just sheer numbers. The numbers have changed of how many children there are.
Oh, there's people are graduating. Okay, I see.
Yes, and so they've known for years, the people who study demographics, that there's this big change in the number of people available to go to college. So separate from whatever's going on societally, just there aren't as many people. And what I find when I talk to other tutors and other test prep people, a lot of people just aren't aware of it, or they're not paying attention, or they're like, oh, this is always the way it's going to be. And I really find that short-sighted, because I feel like as a business owner, I got to be 5 steps ahead, and I got to be ready to pivot. And when my SAT and ACT business dropped off, I work with younger students who take private school and boarding school entrance exams, and I pivoted hard to targeting that market because I wasn't sure this other market was going to be viable anymore. So I always want to make sure I'm ready to change.
That is a great piece of advice as well, because if this shift is expected within the next couple of years, there's probably even going to be more shifts that people have to be thinking about in their own businesses, more additions, more path there. I want to do a quick fire question round.
Sure.
So I'll have a quick question, and you can tell me the first thing that comes to mind. This may be tricky, so.
Okay, I'll see. Sometimes it takes me a second to think through things, but we'll see.
First is SAT or ACT?
Depends. Currently, I like the ACT better, but it's about to change, and they're not being very forthcoming. So I'm a little irritated with them as a company.
ACT overall, but they have their shortcomings. All right. Austin or Maui?
Maui.
Nature or city?
Nature.
And this one might be a little longer to think. What is something that you believe that most people would disagree with you on?
Probably that tests are fun.
That's true. Well, last, I'm gonna end with a question that I think a lot of people have been asking, and it's a good one. Is there something that I should have asked and I didn't ask?
I think you should ask how I'm using technology currently in my business.
That would be a great question to ask.
I would love, because as it happens, that's been a big struggle for me the last 5 years as I've been transitioning my business, is to find the tools that are useful for my business. So pre-pandemic, I had used an online scheduler for years. That was one of the things I had done. I let my students schedule their own appointments, that managed them. It saved me a ton of time with bookkeeping, but the program I was using was really expensive compared to like Calendly and Acuity. And so I switched at the beginning of the pandemic when I went online to, I think, Acuity, but it didn't do all the things that I wanted to the way I did. And so I've switched calendar systems probably 7 times in the last 5 years, which I don't recommend, but because none of them quite did what I wanted, and I couldn't figure it out until I'd set everything up. And then the second I'd add my first student to it and start using it in my business, I'd realize, oh no, this is not going to work. And the same is true for the platforms that I've been using for my curriculum. And so I have recreated my curriculum probably also 7 or 8 times. And same deal, I can't find a program that has been useful for me in all the ways that I need it to be. And I have been using study spaces these last couple of months, and I'm still setting things up because I've got 20 years of content shove in there. But I'm really excited about it because it does seem to do the things that I want it to do. I'm really excited about the AI, and I'm learning new ways to use things. And sometimes the prompts, when I'm using the system, it doesn't work quite the way I need to. So I'll go to ChatGPT. I'm like, write me a prompt that does this and help me create this story template, and then tell the other AI to do this. And I'm figuring out how to manipulate the system in a way that is conducive to me, because sometimes I'm like, no, stop doing that. But it's really fascinating to see how all the technology has changed, because when I started, Dropbox didn't even exist yet. And so I was taking my files from my office to my home on a jump drive and trying to keep my files synced. And so that is where I started technology wise with my business. And to be able to sit down and just go, write me 10 sentence completion questions and write the answer explanation and have it done is the best thing in the world. So I'm really excited about trying that out with my students right now. I've probably got another month or so before I'm finished putting it together. But with my next round of students, I'm excited to see what happens.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you're having fun. Well, my last thing is, if people would like to connect with you, where should they find you?
Sure. So my business is called In-House Test Prep, and my website is www.inhousetestprep.com. You can also just Google me, Kelly Frindell. I'm the only me, so you'll find me. And I'm always happy to talk. I offer a free consultation. There's a link on my website. You're always welcome to click on that and schedule on a call.
Awesome. Well, this was really fun. Thank you, Dr. Frindell. Hopefully, we'll have you back on again in the future.
Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.